This is the best I've got. Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you so much for coming along. Being honest, we're quite overwhelmed. We didn't expect so many people. There's a few friendly faces in the audience who promised they'd come along. We thought, great, at least we're not in a room by ourselves. Yeah. But this is like the extreme opposite, so thank you so much. My name is Jen Cowell, and this is my colleague Megan, and we're from the University of Stirling. And today we'd like to talk to you about integrating culture, both academic and social, into an EAP provision that for us was a 2-week induction programme. We are both TESOL trained from St Andrews, and we're so pleased that one of our lecturers from St Andrews is here to kind of show us support. But yeah, so thanks so much. I'll start. Can you tell I'm nervous? I was not expecting this kind of turnout. So we both work within a department called Student Learning Services. It's a central department that actually provides academic skills to everyone, all students at the university. But because Megan and I are both TESOL trained, we've been asked to bring all of that knowledge into our work and to do a lot of other supporting things that otherwise the department would not normally have been able to do. So as part of that conversation that was going on, we quickly realised that with regards for this context of this induction programme, like everyone here that we've been talking to, there has been a high increase in diverse cohorts, a huge uptick in international students. At the same time, staff, both professional services and academics, were noticing lots of signs of potential difficulties with regards to social acculturation and integration of different types of students, because the groups of students were just so highly diverse. And speaking to the students and looking at student feedback at both module and programme levels within the university, we noticed that quite a few of them were mentioning these difficulties as well. So Megan and I asked if we could put something together to try and support everyone. Part of that was this induction programme, which was targeted towards supporting international students, but there were other things going on as well. I was providing training for academic staff around intercultural communication. We both work with home students, although I don't like that title, but just so everyone knows who I'm talking about. We're working with home students as well. So there's lots of different programs happening to try and, address these difficulties from different angles. So our response was a bespoke and holistic programme aimed at addressing potential barriers, in particular acculturation stressors, and really helping students understand key literacy and obviously academic integrity, which I don't know, speaking to a few of you, you seem to have had similar experiences around academic integrity difficulties. Within the design part of this, we then went into consultation with staff, students and alumni to try and make sure that this was really as targeted as possible to help them. And part of that consultation really highlighted that induction was the ideal time, because that way we're getting students right at the beginning of their journeys when the stakes are low. They're just at the start, and we can really work with them before their studies kick off and suddenly they have assessments to focus on. So we felt that that was a great way to really address that and try to help with that successful transition point. So that way students were coming in and comfortable and weren't then faced with possibly having to leave or take a leave of absence because it was just too overwhelming. Throughout all of this, we realised that culture, though, was important, both academic and social, because it's not just academic difficulties. As you all know, students struggle to integrate culturally with their peers. So whilst we were doing other things to try and help from different angles. This one, we really wanted to intertwine culture throughout all of it and underpin what we were doing. The induction programme took place over a 2-week period. It was 8 one-hour workshops. We decided to have it online. 6 of these hours were workshops looking at key academic skills, and 2 of them were conversation or Q&A sessions. So that way it was really student-led. And one of these sessions was actually delivered by alumni. They were the ones answering the questions, although we were there to support them. And the other one was staff, but not us, our colleagues, including academic members of staff from the faculties. That way, we felt that students could ask questions that they might not otherwise want to ask. And we found that by having these conversation classes at the end of each week, or near the end of each week, it helped sort of, by that point, the fear was gone a bit. We built that trust level with them, and they were far more open and wanting to ask questions, which was lovely to see, especially the alumni one, because we wanted that student voice to come through. These were lived experiences, and although I am an alumni of Stirling, it's been a while. So we wanted to make sure that they could ask questions that they might not otherwise ask. So there were 3 occurrences in autumn, 1 in spring. The reason for the 3 was actually because we have 2 intakes in autumn. We have an undergraduate start date and a postgraduate. So we felt that by repeating it 3 times, or running it 3 times, one after the other, it meant that we were busy for 6 weeks. But students could then choose what one they wanted to come to, with the idea that hopefully they would take it the 2 weeks before the start date. So we had lined it up that the first 2 occurrences would take place just before the start date for one of the intakes. And then the last one was then kind of a catch-up for anyone. With students, we had 313 in autumn, 171 in spring. So we were quite chuffed, especially because we knew we were doing this on Teams, and we knew there was a cap of 1,000 for our team meeting. So we had that fear of, what if we have to turn students away? So we weren't near there, thankfully. Students received invites by email, so anyone who was applying as an international student, whether it be postgraduate, undergraduate, or even study abroad for a year, got the invite. With regards to the programme design, it was very much aimed at reducing stressors and wanting to increase positive outcomes for students. We were very much aligned with using scaffolded activities with anonymous responses. We didn't want to put students on the spot at all, so we used polls on Teams a lot, or different activities like that got the students interacting with us without the fear of being named or being picked on. Within part of that design, there's 3 components to it. The first one was very much looking at the traditional 4 language skills within EAP, looking at what we had learnt from working within academic skills, because I know there's a bit of a debate of how much do they align, how much are they separate compared to EAP, and also acculturation, and we wanted to bring it all in and combine it. So that led to us interweaving language and acculturation together, and very much making it tangible, relatable, so linking theory to everyday things. So for example, when we were talking about summarising, we say, well, you can already summarise. Imagine you're going to the cinema and you've seen a film, you come out and tell your friend what it's like. You don't repeat it line by line, you don't give the whole script. You give an overall view, and by linking it to examples like that of everyday, we found it was really helpful for the students. And because we only had 8 hours with them, it really had to be short, sharp, and targeted. So really specific to those occurrences. We even changed the order of the workshops to make sure that things like, one of them was navigating Stirling, both the physical and online learning spaces, and the city. For some occurrences that happened at the end, just before they arrived. For some, that was the very first workshop because they were here, potentially. So we made sure that it really was addressing what they needed at that time. So just to show you some examples of how we interweaved culture. So the bottom one, the hierarchy of sources, looked at helping from the academic side of view of culture, of how do we perceive sources, academic sources, how is there hierarchy to this? When it came to things like speaking in class, it was actually looking at the social side, what is acceptable when, why, just to try and break down those fears for them. We also wanted to make sure it was free for all and online in order to ensure inclusivity and accessibility. Now, we also, because it was free, it was only 2 weeks, it was never meant to replace pre-sessionals. So obviously they could still undertake that as optionally if they wished. And by doing this, we hoped that it would avoid accidental marginalisation or isolation by trying to make sure it's inclusive as much as possible. We also tried to ensure best practice was followed, so things like trauma-informed pedagogy, trying to reduce stressors for them emotionally and mentally, and really increase that feeling of belonging by using communicative approaches, decolonisation, all of those lovely buzzwords that we like to hear. So, with that in mind.
So based on all of that, what we tried to do is get some feedback on how well we'd achieved what we wanted to achieve. So we started by asking for some very simple feedback at the end of each of the workshops. And this was literally just an anonymous poll on Teams, rating out of 5 stars and any comments that they wanted to give us about the workshop. The average score of those individual workshops came out about 4.8 out of 5, so we were really pleased with how well the students had engaged with that. And the key themes that kept coming up were students were saying it refreshed their memory. Some of them actually already knew some of this, but it was nice to kind of get that refresher. It introduced those studying expectations at a UK higher institution, and actually what we got a lot of was it was nice to be able to talk to those other students. And that was what we originally wanted to do in that alumni session, was give them that chance, stop it just being all staff nominated. In terms of feedback for the overall programme, the feedback for the individual sessions was done within the Teams meeting. The overall programme was done as an anonymous poll separately. So we didn't actually get as much feedback from the overall programme. At this point, students had started studying. But what we did get, the average score was about 4.6 out of 5 of the total programme. And again, with the feedback we were getting, what we tried to do throughout the programme was signpost them to the available support that the university had. And that came up in the feedback, that there was that reassurance about the support that was available, that they weren't just going to be left on their own once they'd finished this programme. A few mentioned how this overview of Stirling, the navigating Stirling workshops and getting an idea of Stirling as a university really helps them with that initial culture shock, the acculturation period. And it allowed them to settle in perhaps a little bit quicker, get a little bit more excited about their studies than there were a couple of comments where the excitement had kind of overtaken from the nerves again, which is kind of what we were aiming for. And then the final one, and this was a theme that came in quite a lot of the feedback, and this was the one that we were really thrilled about, was that it tried to promote a sense of belonging at Stirling. It started to give them this idea of the communities that they had, both students, staff. They got this idea that if me and Jen were kind and supportive, maybe some of the other staff would be as well, and it hopefully started to promote that a little bit. The impact of the programme is still a little bit hard to measure. This only started last September, but at the moment what we can see the impact of is, as I was just saying, students have reported feeling a little bit more settled and prepared to start studying at Stirling than they did before. And again, it helped them feel like they belonged a little bit. It enabled them to feel that connection to the staff and students. You may not be able to see this properly, but this is a pencil drawing that I did of Stirling Uni, and this was an example of what we tried to do. This was like a colouring sheet, and it's available online for them to print out, and it was just one of the small ways we wanted to bring in a little bit more creativity, reduce some of that initial stress by doing something just fun, but because it's the campus, it again promotes that slight sense of belonging to the university. On an institutional level, The only thing we really have to go on at this point, because it's still quite new, is we recently had the International Student Barometer results for Stirling. And they suggested that 95% of our international students were satisfied with their virtual orientation programme. So that's a little bit higher than the UK benchmark. But the interesting one is that satisfaction with orientation has gone up 7% on average compared to Stirling University in 2018. And 90% were satisfied with their learning experience overall at this stage. So although this only gives a sort of overall idea at the moment, it's what we've got to work on for now, and it does suggest that it is having some sort of impact, and we'll hopefully continue to see that as it continues to run. But that was created just for international students. It's now going to be expanded. So based on all the feedback that we've got, the university now wants us to take the induction model that we created and expand it to the whole university. So what we're going to do is we're going to separate the students into 5 strands. We're not going to separate them. We will have 5 strands, and what the students will be allowed to do is self-identify which strand works best for them. So we have the international, which will stay largely the same as it has done. Then we have undergrad and postgrad. We have mature stroke advanced entry students. We get quite a few students at Stirling coming straight in from college. And then we have an online stroke commuting, where again, a lot of the things they need are similar, but what they don't have is necessarily the same connection with the physical campus. So each of those strands is going to be tailored to the needs of that particular cohort. The aim is to still very much focus on reducing those stresses, reducing the anxiety, starting at Stirling, starting at any university. And we still want to really maintain this focus on cultural integration. But at this point, what we're doing is taking it outside just international students, trying to acknowledge the fact that culture and cultural stress, it works for everyone, and actually involving, as Jen said, we don't like the word home students, but home students along with international and everything, it brings that sense of belonging quite early on. The actual content of the inductions are going to remain largely the same, but what we're going to do is slightly adapt it to the strand. So for example, the postgrad strand is going to have a little bit more focus on research strategies and critical thinking. The induction programme is still going to maintain a focus on speaking and contributing in class, whereas some of the other strands are going to focus a bit more on logistics and expectations in general as to how that particular strand generally wants to integrate themselves into Stirling. That is going to form what we're now actually going to call an orientation programme. This will be the series of live workshops, the same as we've done before, that will then lead into the existing asynchronous induction materials. It's designed to sort of work in tandem with that. So I think that's everything.